Show. Now, as you'll know, we're doing our Cannes cool down today, and I think we all need it after what was an insanely busy week of news, views, and absolutely everything to do with the advertising and marketing world. And, as I think we'll get into over the course of our discussion, there were so many surprises, welcome and unwelcome perhaps, and in addition to that, we saw so many pieces of news broken from practitioners across the industry, from brands talking about the metaverse to brands who are really experimenting with reaching audiences in new ways in 2022. More importantly, though, I feel like it was the first Cannes where we sort of got back to the proper spirit of Cannes, you know, having been away for a couple of years. So I'm actually going to quickly ask my guests to introduce themselves so that we can get into the discusussion. So, Ross, why don't you start?
Hello, I'm Ross Neal. I'm an ECD at VCCP.
Fantastic. And Nick?
I'm Nicholas Halley. I'm the co-chief creative officer with my partner Nadia Lascott from AMV BBDO.
Fantastic. And actually, we were talking there about some unwelcome surprises, and you had a, let's say, torturous trip there and back from Cannes. So why don't you just kick us off with that story?
The long version or the horrific short version?
Do the horrific one. Make it as horrifying and condensed as possible.
Well, I was judging this year, and I was judging with my wife, who's a planner, which meant that we had to take our 16-month-old baby to Cannes with us. So one stream of the horror is the realization that you're going to be pushing a pram down the Crozet saying, Gabriel, this is nothing to look at the Gata bar, and then contemplate mortality and growing older and the fact that you are now pushing a baby down the Crozet. That's the one horror. But the real horror is that on the way there, our flight was cancelled, so we had to take a train with a 16-month-old baby from London down to Cannes, which was long. I think the most hated famine in France, if you polled people on the TGV. And then on the way back, our flight got cancelled, and we had to, there was no way home other than to hire a car and drive through the night from Cannes to Lille, and then jump on a Eurostar back to London.
This is
with a 16-month-old baby, yeah.
This is after all the excitement of the festival.
After all of the excitement, yes.
So, I mean, I imagine you don't have quite as many horror stories. No. They were self-inflicted.
No, nothing like that. 3-hour delay that actually seems like a breeze.
Well, so we were talking there about sort of unwelcome or unexpected surprises, and I think that one of the things that really captured people's imaginations outside of Cannes this year was Greenpeace, because they I don't want to use the word stormed, but they appeared on a beach, let's say, and then they climbed on top of the Palais as well. So would you say that that was one of the key takeaways, was this idea that was marketing activity on behalf of Greenpeace, and they sort of really made a statement with it that, from the looks of our stats, almost overshadowed a lot of the news that came out of Cannes? Is that fair to say that that was one of the big pieces of excitement that came out of it?
I think it was. I think it shows the importance of Cannes, that Greenpeace actually felt the need to, and you know, I'm not going to mince my words, storm the beach.
Yeah.
Albeit very, very slowly. You know, storming a beach by canoe is something that is going to take a while, so, you know, good on them. But yeah, I think it kind of shows the importance of the festival, that they actually felt the need, that that's where they were going, as opposed to seats of government, seats of kind of, you know, big industry. And instead it was our sort of advertising community that they decided to storm, which, you know, I think good on them.
Absolutely, and you know, at the Drum we like to say that marketing can change the world, and it's changed by the world. So, you know, there's no quicker way to disseminate a message than through effective marketing.
Yep.
So absolutely. But something else that came out a lot, one of the best performing pieces that we wrote in the over the course of the week was one from our editor, Cameron Clark, who was writing about the idea that the industry is maybe taking a bit of a haircut in expectations, and you know, he's quoting Sir Martin Sorrell around that, the idea that perhaps we need to start bracing for a little bit of cool down on behalf of client spend. Is that something that you almost got from the atmosphere there, or was it much more of a party atmosphere?
I think that the party atmosphere was driven by the real joy of coming back together again. Yeah. And I think that, from my perspective, being in a jury room, just it's just a great experience sharing ideas. It's what we missed from our agencies, that free flow of ideas, getting each other's opinions, having our mind change. So the joy was that sense of reunion. But certainly from my perspective and from the perspective of everyone from AMV, there was a lot of time spent with clients, time spent on talks. It was a learning experience rather than a party atmosphere.
That makes sense, yeah, and like you said, nice to come back together again after some time apart. Something else that we heard a lot about was purpose, and whether that is now sort of falling down the agenda ever so often when we're talking about marketing effectiveness and materials and what audiences expect. I think we actually do have a clip to show of a panel discussion where that exact thing came up.
Yeah, I had a great day today. It's been an amazing couple of days so far. And what's really struck me, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about purpose, right? We're seeing every year, we're seeing more in sustainability, more in societal impact. And a couple of things struck me as I listened to some of the panels and looked at some of the work today. One is, you know, the work that solves a real problem and creates massive impact is by far just more interesting, more effective, more intriguing. And so, you know, looking at the one that was top of mind to me today was Back Up Ukraine. And just the power of that insight and somebody solving a real problem in a...
So I suppose the real question there is, when we're talking about marketing effectiveness, where does purpose now fit into that, I suppose, into the discussion? Is it its own selling point, or does it have to be backed up by, you know, some tangible outcome?
Well, I've got to say, I think that this year, more than any other in the last decade, I sort of saw purpose kind of come down the agenda, and it was more about brands finding their meaning in a conversation. And I think what that is it is very much this, and I've heard it referred to this several times now, as the Copernicus shift, and realizing that me and my brand, we're not the center of the universe and the sun goes around us. You suddenly realize, oh, there's another center and I go around it. And it's that sense that, you know, for quite a long time, we've sort of played with that triangle of hero, villain, victim, and the brands want to be the hero, and I'm going to dive in here and solve the world's problem, and you can thank me later with a lion. And it's like, no, you know, now we're kind of finding that we're finding that so many brands now are kind of going, actually, my meaning's over here, and it might be a little bit smaller than saving the entire world, but, you know, for the sake of argument, I can actually clean up a little bit of plastic from beaches. I can do that. I am not going to change the sort of solar rotation of the universe, but I can do my bit. And I thought that was something that I thought was quite interesting this time.
Yeah, certainly. I love the idea that some agencies in particular have gone, you know, yeah, we've done some good stuff. Awards, please. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Nick, beyond kind of that purpose discussion, then, what were some of the emerging themes that you were aware of this year?
Well, I think I would, I'll stick to the sunless, airless room that I was stuck in for the majority of the room in the Glass jury. But I do think that that's fascinating because, of course, Glass is about gender, shifting the way we do gender. It's got purpose right at its heart. But I think when you look at all the winning work, you see the full spectrum of creativity, because I think it always comes back to creativity. So whatever it is, it's always worth reminding ourselves that purpose, that's the brief. It's not the creative solution. We bring our creativity. But if you look at the Grand Prix winner in Glass, for example, that was using an incredibly brilliant, creative way to resolve a catch-22. To get credit, you need a credit history. To get a credit history, you need credit. And they've just found a way to turn mom and pop stores into a way of creating data. That's creativity at its most problem-solving best. But then you look at the other one, another campaign that won gold, that was a brand playing with subverting its own stereotypes of telling love stories and using its power as a mainstream vehicle to shift perspective through a film showing what love isn't. It was in Greece. And then also going with getting girls to code, just being badass and cool and wonderful. And it just shows that all of our creativity can be used in different ways, to shift the needle on culture, to solve catch-22s, to be cool and aspirational.
That's really nice, and I love that you brought up creativity, because that's obviously one of the key things we're going to be talking about today is, you know, how do you do creative effectively. Both of you are going to be taking us through some of those. And then we're going to be talking about our best ads. But as a final question on Cannes, I wondered, we've seen the needle shift, as you mentioned, on some discussions that once upon a time would have been completely unthinkable. So obviously Netflix introducing ads was sort of announced. We saw Nike, or rather we saw Fender and Mini, well, BMW sort of getting into that metaverse space in a really sort of tangible way. So what were some of the most exciting things that you saw coming out of Cannes, and maybe some of the trends that you're hoping to see more of the next time we can all get there, hopefully slightly easier than you managed to get there this time. But yeah, so the next time we go there, what do you want to see?
So one thing that I thought was quite interesting that I saw a lot of, so we're sort of going through the kind of that kind of maze-like basement of all of the work, all of the entries, not just your Grand Prix and everything, but a lot of it seemed to be based in observations the brands had made about the world and not necessarily coming from briefs from clients. So things like social listening. I think one of my favorite pieces was the peanut butter brand Jif in America.
Yeah.
They had just heard people saying online, all the new rappers, basically everyone that's coming out at the moment just sounds like they're rapping with a mouthful of peanut butter. And they went, you know what, this is brilliant. This has actually got us a space for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a peanut butter challenge. Everyone's, get involved. And I think one of the big shifts for me was throughout all of the years, we've got categories for everything, like everything. You've got your directors, you've got your production companies, you've got your best direct marketing, you've got everything, blah, 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 blah. And for me, the one thing that's missing in that whole conversation is audience.
Yeah.
And for me, I think when you look at something like the Jif peanut butter thing, it's the audience who are doing it. It's the audience that are moving. And for me, I don't know how you'd ever kind of correlate this or in any way kind of award an audience, but you kind of go, you know what, the audience are going to be the next thing. And I think that when we hear things like Martin Sorrell going, we've got to kind of shift expectations. For me, it's a case of, well, why don't we shift the expectation over to the audience and go, here's a absolutely flammable idea. You take that, you do something with it, give it back to us, and we'll just be part of the conversation. We won't be here on the top barking down to you as an audience. We'll be actually getting off the podium and getting in with the audience and going, you do it with us.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting, and that's exactly what we've seen. Platforms like TikTok really almost bet the farm on going forward, is the ability to kind of bring UGC right into the heart of the campaigns.
Yeah.
But we're talking there about creative campaigns, and I wondered, some of the best things we've seen out the past year have been the ones that really have created community, created conversation, and really generated engagement, particularly around the last couple of years when that's been very difficult. So Nick, you actually, with Nadia, you worked on a really fantastic creative campaign. I wondered if you could maybe take us through what it looked like to the audience, and then maybe we can go into the brief of it.
The Guinness Welcome Back. So the concept, obviously, the concept for it was celebrating I can't remember the month, but it was the 17th of May when pubs were going to be open, and not just passing a plastic pint through a window that you could have on the street, but fully sit down, come back inside in the pub. And what we could see from social listening is that it was not just that people were longing for being back in the pub, but they were longing to have a Guinness. And I think that we were sort of realized that that Guinness was almost a symbol. It sort of represented full normality. You have to, for a pint in a pub, you need to be sat down, you need to be inside. And people just talking about how much they were longing for that. And there was this creative leap of when you miss something, you start to see it everywhere. And so we just imagined all the people in the UK seeing pints of Guinness everywhere. And then we built it socially, because it was a social idea. So it started socially. We're saying, are you seeing pints everywhere? The World Bollard Association came in on the act because they started seeing pints. Yeah. They were behind the campaign, and then put it out in the world, and it just did capture that mood of that moment.
I think that's so interesting because it's such a unique time to have created a campaign like that, really evoking that almost the old Warner Brothers type cartoons of somebody who's really hungry, picturing somebody as like a steak sandwich or whatever. Yeah. But you actually managed to bring, I suppose, the community who, at this point, the community was everybody who wanted to get back to the pub. You managed to really bring them into the campaign in an interesting way.
I think it's a combination. This is the craft of it, I think, is because bringing people into the conversation, you have to move them, you have to connect with them emotionally. And I think the way we were looking at it was that it was a mixed emotion. So there was the joy that people were looking forward to, but there was also almost this nostalgia and a melancholy sitting behind it of what everybody had been through. And you kind of just knew that you couldn't just be euphoria because it wouldn't feel authentic, and it couldn't just be melancholy because it would be depressing. So it was trying to merge those two things. And then it was in the craft of the casting. That guy who he's taking his drink at the end. I mean, I think the only major note was just please do not shave that beard of yours for the shoot, because he just genuinely looked like he'd stepped out of his room that he'd been locked in for two years. And it's in that crafty detail that you then connect with an audience.
Yeah, that's so smart. And you're so right about the melancholy as well. I remember talking to one of my friends in Wales who, just as the pubs were reopening, said, oh God, you know what, I was in the pub last night for the first time in ages and we just ended up weeping into our pints. And I was like, oh, was it bad? And he was like, no, it was brilliant. Yeah, I loved it, yeah. But you also had sort of a creative campaign that was talking to a wide audience. And I just want, maybe could you start by telling the name of the campaign, because I think it's great.
Yeah, it was for walkers, and it was called Crisp In, Crisp Out. And again, to your point, Nick, there, like social listening and almost listening to the audience and kind of going, you're kind of the brief. So for us, when we were social listening about walkers, and the time that people eat walkers the most is lunchtime, and the main thing people eat at lunch is is sandwiches. So rather than go against sandwiches, we were like, well, we're going to be the party to sandwiches. So we're just going to open this debate. Do you have your sandwich with your crisp in, or do you have it with your crisp out? And one thing we discovered quite early on that I thought was just such a remarkable thing is the majority of people who have crisps in their sandwiches are utterly ashamed of it. Honestly, they're looking at the ground like, yeah, I actually have them in. I'm so sorry. And it's like, dude, it's all right. It's okay. So
they're adulterating the pure form of the sandwich.
I know, nightmare. So anyway, so we had this this initial campaign. Year one was people who were crisp in, being ashamed about doing it in public, and it was just like, oh my gosh, the shame of this, what I'm doing, but I have to do it because I love it. So that was year one, and then year two, what we decided to do was actually open it up and dress it up like a political debate. So we had two different parties, our crisp in party and our crisp out party. And we did again, I'm sure we'll talk about Martin Sorrell's comments about how we're shifting things in a minute, but rather than going out with a big TV ad, it was a social first campaign. And we made a film where we had our celebrity-filled panels, including Gordon Ramsay, who'd actually, on year one, completely unprompted, had waded into the argument, like windmilling, in a kind of proper Gordon Ramsay way, basically going, Chris deserves to be out. I can't even believe we're having this discussion.
Gordon Ramsay with some strident opinions, I don't believe that. That's pretty good. And I dread to ask, just before we get into sort of the wider comments about creativity, what was the who won the debate? I'm scared in case it was a 52-48 split again. The proportion that puts the fear of God into everybody.
Yeah, so the vote happened in the town of Sandwich on the 19th of June. And we're waiting for the results to come in, but Crispin won, I think, by quite a margin.
Okay, well, thank God for that. At least we're not going to be split down the middle as a country anymore.
Yes,
right?
indeed.
Fantastic. But you mentioned Sir Martin Sorrell there, and one of the things that he mentioned to our editor, Cameron Clark, at Cannes, he said, clients don't like to give agencies bad news. That makes sense. I mean, it's very rare that client will say, you know what, I'm going to cut my spend or I'm going to limit my spend, maybe until the very last minute. So it's very difficult to figure that out. In light of what we're seeing around economic trends and everything, do you think that social listening campaigns like yours, which are, like you said, don't launch with a huge, great TV ad potentially, that they are almost an antidote to this expectation that you have to go big on legacy advertising products in light of potential reduced spend? Is social listening almost the silver bullet to getting audiences involved en masse?
So I think the one thing that has I'm answering your question with a totally different point, then I'll come back. I'll circle back to the question. So one thing that I certainly think over the last 7 years that has shifted Cannes for me, that I think was highlighted by the Snapchat Ferris wheel at the end of the Croisette, was plutocratic mega bucks, money descending on what we have grown up as being a creative festival. It's
Yeah.
about an idea, not how much money you've got. And I think the moment we make this kind of shift into social listening and going back to our consumers and going, hey guys, we've got a really good idea. You are making it more about the creative idea than you are about how much money you've got. And one thing that's, without mincing my words, that's really pissed me off over the last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, has been the amount of money that people have pumped into stuff. And, you know, big brands buying up the beach and Ferris wheels and goodness knows what else. And you kind of go, yeah, but you're not focusing on an idea. There's no creativity in this. It's literally how deep your pockets are. And I think that now when it's kind of like, well, reduction of budget, reduction of this, reduction of that, you've got to be an even better ninja at being able to dodge things, move around things, come up with a creative idea that is absolutely fertile for you to go, here, catch.
Yeah.
And for other people to go, it's such a good idea, I'm going to do this version. And then it mutates and grows into something else. And then you've got a sort of amazing other organism that you didn't even realize you were going to be the parent of because the idea was so good.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the silver bullet is radical empathy, and radical empathy is social listening, but with a soul and with a purpose, and being able to then understand what is happening and then make that creative leap, and to be able to, as you say, it's the size of the idea, not the size of the budget. But once you have that great idea, you can respond in any medium on any platform.
Yeah, it's almost the kind of the hub, and everything else is like the spokes rating aid.
And I think that a lot of the brands that were really successful during the pandemic were the brands that had brand platforms, because they knew what to say and how to say it. They knew what their opinion was going to be as events were unfolding. And
that's actually that's a really, really good point, and it brings me on neatly to the next question, which is we're talking about there about money flowing into it and potentially getting in the way of the great creative idea, because we think about what it might look like rather than actually having that core message to begin with. But from what you've experienced with those creative campaigns, is there anything that's bottlenecking creativity, either within the industry, talking to clients? Where are we really seeing almost roadblocks being thrown up in the way of doing a really good creative campaign?
I think, and I think that one thing that I think is somewhat hamstringing us, certainly from a creative corner, is the need for immediate results. I want immediate results, and I think people are kind of stepping back and almost forgetting about brand health, and seeing the monitor of the heartbeat of a brand. And it's diminishing as the results are going up for a very, very, very short spike. And I think that's the one thing that is possibly eroding, building brands. I mean, I think about a brand like Guinness, and I'm kind of like, the pulse of that brand is so strong because it's, the brand platform is so fantastic. But then I look at other things where people are just doing short, sharp spikes. And I think people don't realize the detrimental effect that it has on a brand.
Is that just in terms of potentially not remaining at the forefront of the audience mind if they only sort of like spike and then disappear, or is it?
I think it's the cumulative effect of that message, that your ad sort of stock doesn't just diminish back to zero and then you've got to build it up. I think when you have a consistent point of view, when you have a vision, you have those strong assets, it's accumulating that value over time, so that there's always a recognition. You become famous for something rather than just having to inject it up and then watch it go down and then pump it up again.
Yeah, so there's actually, like I said, almost the need to take a step back and really reappraise what the brand means and do it in an empathetic way as well, that actually is consistent with what the audience wants as well. That's fantastic. Well, what we've been doing on the drum over the past couple of weeks is our creativity focus. And as part of that, we've done a long list of some of the best ads that our panel of judges really felt like exemplified what advertising can do. And obviously at the top we have some of the really, really famous ones. Guinness is in there, obviously. I think what we're missing was the Judderman one. I don't know if you remember that. That was horrifying. Yep. Some of the really, really good trailers for games, which I think count as advertising. But the ones that really stuck in the judges' minds at the top 10 were the ones that are so meticulous in getting a message across. And I wondered if, from what you've seen of that short list of ads, is there anything that you think really sticks out, either as a great example of what advertising can do, or of a trend that you think kind of runs through all the best, most effective ads?
I think for me, Dumb Ways to Die.
Yeah.
Dumb Ways to Die will always, for me, forever hold that golden pole position. I think very specifically the moment I will always hold dear was the year it cleaned up and won everything. Was walking down the Croisette, and someone was coming off the beach who had actually been judging at that time. And I said, how's it going? How's the whole festival going? And they're saying, I've seen this thing called Dumb Ways to Die. And I was like, oh yeah, I know. And she goes, the thing is, my kid has been singing that for the last 2 months in London. And I had no idea it was an advertising campaign. So I'm like, my God, hang on. So let's get this straight. It's a regional train network in Australia, and you're in London, and your kid is singing the jingle from this to you. Yeah. And then you get into the festival. For me, that is when work is absolutely transcends being a piece of comms and turns into culture. And that's why I always hold that one dear.
That's such a great way of putting it. It transcends kind of its core message and then becomes part of the culture.
Yeah.
And there are some of the ones on that shortlist that really have done that stick in people's mind almost more than the entertainment which they sort of bookended. So would you say that there is anything that particularly stuck out to you as one of the best ads that you think will really stand the test of time?
I mean, I'm going to be shameless and say Guinness Surfer,
Yeah.
but it is a piece of popular culture. It's you at the dentist and they ask you what you do for a living. You say advertising, and they go, oh, have you done it? What do you work on? And you say Guinness, and unfortunately, it's not your ad. Although there was for the Guinness Suppose, that was one that went into culture, but it's always the dentist as he's about to drill in, say, oh, the surfer. So that is for sure made it into culture, and it is just it's the trinity of a brilliant idea that's related to the product. That the message is all about the product. It's beautifully crafted. I mean, it's crafted like you can never imagine. So for sure, that one. Even if it's shameless that I said it.
I was going to say, some of the, I think all of the top 10 in particular have that magic combination of being so visually distinct, but being paired with other sensory sort of properties as well, like that. The Guinness Surf one is thunderous in sort of its audio, and then obviously with Dumb Ways to Die, you've got the entire jingle that goes along with it. So is there, I suppose, when we're talking about creativity, and particularly when we're talking about video ads in this, is it a reflective of the culture that surrounds it, or does it almost create the culture around it? Because that Guinness one really inspired music videos, it inspired kind of this chiaroscuro approach to creativity elsewhere as well. Is it, reflection of culture or creator of it?
I've got to say, I think that for me, every great thing that I see in the film sector has, and especially this year when you look at all of the work from Apple, which I thought Apple was fantastic this year. I thought they had some great stuff in there. The detectives work and the slow zoom and all of that kind of thing. I think if you're looking at a Venn diagram, having something that has that element of future-facing modernity, but then it crosses over with a lovely sense of almost Spielberg-esque nostalgia, and in that kind of intersection in the middle, where it's kind of like, God, this is modern and it looks forward, but at the same time, it's almost got a kind of honey-colored hug that I just kind of go, oh yeah, I feel like this is familiar in a way, and God, this is great. And in my mind, it just fits perfectly like a piece of Lego, and it goes, yeah, it's almost like I knew this all along.
This is the one, yeah. This is part of me. It needs to be drawn out.
The element of a great story is always the same. It's an old truth married to a new execution, and I think when you get those right, you are going to make culture just as much as anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's doubly true almost for the two campaigns you mentioned before, for Guinness and Walkers, which tapped into not just kind of an existing social debate or social need, but delivered it in a way that was memorable and sort of instinctively distinctive.
There you go.
Well. But thank you so much. We could have spoken about creativity. I'm sure we will at some point in the near future, and definitely the next can. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to have this conversation. It's been fascinating for me. So thank you very much, of course.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. And for everybody at home as well, please do stick around. Go to thedrum.com, where we do have that list of all the best ads that our judges decided was worth commemorating. Also on The Drum, we talk about marketing, we talk about media, we talk about advertising, we talk about absolutely everything. So please do go to thedrum.com for more explorations of all the topics that we've spoken about today and more. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. Bye.